Hey guys, today's video is going to be great. Today I'm going to be showing you how to set up a Django project in Ubuntu. Literally all we need is Ubuntu and Python, which should come with it anyway. So let's check our release. I think I'm 18.04 even. What else do we want? We want to check our Python 3 version. We will be needing Python 3. So I'm on Python 3.6.9. You know, as long as you're on something similar, it should all work. As long as you're on Python 3, it should work. So let's get started. So what we want to do is, well, usually I put my code into this directory called code, but I don't want to go too deep. So actually I'm going to rmrfa. So I'm basically just deleting this folder up here. And then I'm going to go ahead and make another folder called A. So I'm just replacing it. I already had it. So cd A. And it's going to be an empty folder. And all we're going to do now is do Python 3, and we're going to use a virtual environment. If you're following along on Python 2, you'll have to make sure you've installed venv yourself. And we're just going to call this env, which is quite a generic name. Now we can go inside there, but we don't need to. All we need to really do is activate it. So we're going to activate it by going into this directory, and then there's a directory called bin, and then there's going to be, we're going to do activate. So we've now activated our virtual environment, and you always want to do this when you're working with Django, because you basically want to keep everything, all your dependencies within a virtual environment, right? You don't want to be installing everything onto your main PC, because then when you start working on different projects, you might have the wrong packages installed. So hopefully that's clear. So we've done that now. So we're only going to pip install one thing, and then we're going to make something called a requirements file again, so follow along. We don't need to specify Python 3 now, because we've created a virtual environment using Python 3. So by just doing Python, we're now actually using Python 3.6.9. What else do we want to do? We want to pip install, I said, and we want to pip install something called Pip Tools. Now this is a great tool, and I'll show you what it does in just a moment. So hopefully you're still with me here. Super easy, and we're going to now, from the command line, you don't have to do it, you can do it in the folder if you like to. We're just going to create a file called requirements.in. Now I'm going to open this with Sublime. I mean, you don't need to. Doesn't matter what you use. You can ignore all of this stuff. And in here, what we essentially want to do is, this is how we're going to install Django. And I want to use Django 3.1.3. You don't need to do that. You can just write Django. And I might explain to you why you would want to do that. So Django 3.1.3, and we also want to, I didn't mean to do that, install something called Pillow. Now we won't be using this, but if you ever work with images in Django, then in order to upload them, you need to have this installed. So I always recommend having at least these two, but we can always change our requirements later stage in the project. So if we now list that again, and we can use the cat command to actually see what's in this. And we didn't do a new line, so we can actually see we've got Django equals 3.1.3, and Pillow, I haven't actually specified a version. So what this Pip Tools is going to do for us is actually going to find the latest version of Pillow, which is compatible with Django 3.1.3. And if we used a different version, then it would do the same. So that's great. And this is actually super useful. So I'll explain it a bit more, but actually let's just continue with the tutorial, and then I can talk about it. So what we want to do now is Pip Compile. And this is going to look for requirements.in file. So it does that by default. And then it creates a requirements.txt file. Now this requirements.txt file is all you need in order to completely recreate the project. So that's fantastic. So you know, if you go ahead and put your code onto GitHub or something, and there's the requirement.txt file, all someone has to do now is do pip sync like this once they have the requirements file, if they have Pip Tools, and then it's going to collect and install absolutely everything we need for this project. And just to confirm that, we can do Django. And we can check our version now, 3.13. And something I wanted to show you, I mean we can see it here, but this is essentially our text file, our requirements text file. So let's open that. So we go inside here, this is the file that was generated for us, and you could see, so we specified Django in our requirements.in, and we said we want pillow in requirements.in, and it went ahead and chose a version for us. And then these were installed via Django. So it's saying, well, if you want Django, then it's also going to require these packages. So that's super useful. So any dependencies get brought in for you automatically. So the only thing you need to do is actually say, this is the library I need or want, and then it's going to go ahead and grab everything else that you need for that to work. Another time this is sometimes useful is when you're trying to get two packages to work with another, and you don't know which versions are compatible. Then you can kind of state the one you need. So for example, you say, I need it to be Django 3.1.3, but I don't care what version of pillow it is. Then you can just put in pillow. As long as it's compatible, it's cool. And then it will find one. So that's great. Hopefully you're still with me. Hopefully I'm not taking too long. I'm trying to be really thorough. But this is going to be awesome. So we're now going to start our Django server. So now that we've got Django installed, we have this thing called Django Admin, and that's going to allow us to go ahead and start a Django project. And we can actually use the help command, which is going to give us a bunch of Django commands that we can use right out of the box. Now it doesn't give us all of them, but it gives us some. And the one that we want to do is start project. So Django Admin, start project. Now this is essentially what we want it to be called. So this would be your Facebook or your Twitter, etc. Your top level of what your site is essentially. And then, you know, if you were Facebook, yeah, so I'm not going to call it Facebook because that's confusing. But we could just call it, you know, my site. That's kind of the generic thing that people do, or project. It's nothing specific. So this is now going to go ahead and create a directory for us called my site. And what you can do with Sublime, which is great, is you can open a whole folder in the coding area. So I'm going to do that. And we don't care about this one anymore, which is what we were using. And you can see we've actually opened my site, and that this was all generated for us by Django. So don't even worry about that. Don't even think about it. We can have a quick look inside it. Here we've got manage.py. This is where we're going to be putting all of our apps. So what's an app? So imagine our example of Facebook, then one of the apps might be the Messenger. That's I'm not saying that's necessarily what they've done, but that's something that that would be something that's completely separate. You've got this Messenger app, which might then be included in all sorts of different places, or you might have the display feed app, and then you have the profile app, and you know, the login app. You have all these different things. So this is where we're going to basically be working from all of the time. And manage.py is the same as Django Admin, except we have a few more options. So we want to be using Python manage.py. It's a bit different. We don't want to run server yet. We want to see help. And notice we had all of these options, but now we've also got sessions, and we can work with static files. And you can see here we can run server, and that's the first thing we want to do. So Python manage.py. We want to run the server. And this is telling us we've actually started the development server in this location here. Now I'm going to use Chrome for this. I don't usually use Chrome. I usually use other things. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Because my Chrome's not my default one, I can't just click it. So you can see we've successfully got Django working. Now this isn't it. We want to do more, of course. You probably want to write something that you can see in the display, and that's what we're going to work towards today. So you can see here, back on our terminal, it said you have 18 unapplied migrations. Your project may not work properly until you apply these migrations. And it tells us in order to get that to work, we have to run python manage.py migrate. So let's do that, python manage.py migrate. And essentially what this is, it's these are all our tables that we haven't actually said, yes, go ahead and create these. But once we migrate a table, so you know, like an SQL table or database, we're basically saying we're finished with this. You can reverse migrations and you can change tables and stuff, but this is essentially what we're saying. We're saying we're done with this, go ahead, add it, we want to use it. So that's what we've done. So we've applied migrations to the admin tables. These are all default ones, or content type sessions. And there's not really much to think about here. You're just gonna have to take this for what it is. But later, when we go more into models and databases, it'll be much clearer. But that's what we do. And now when we run the server, and hang on, if we decide to have a look at this now, when our server's down, we won't be able to reach it. So our server always needs to be running. So python manage.py run server. So that's great. And if we refresh this now, our server's back up. You are seeing this page because debug equals true. Now this is in your settings file, as it says. We can have a look at that. So if we go into our settings, which is generated for us, we can see debug equals true. So this settings file is kind of where everything gets configured. And you saw when we did the database migration, when we did migrate, it did it because of the apps were installed here. If they're not installed here, then they won't get migrated. So that's something to note when we're creating our own apps. So let's go ahead and create our own app now, which is really easy. Again, I'm going to do it step by step so you see where we're coming from. I want you to be able to actually really understand what's going on as well. So like, how can you use these commands? And actually it says, look, we can use start app in the same way we used to start project. So python manage.py start app. And I'm going to use polls because if you go on the Django official documentation, that's just what they use. They make a polls app. I won't be building that in this session. I could do, but we won't. It's too long, really. But I recommend you go through the tutorial. But let's say we wanted to create an app which has a bunch of polls. So, you know, you can come up with a question, and then there's a bunch of choices for it. You know, what's your favorite color? Then you make some choices: red, green, blue, yellow. Then you can choose one. So that's our polls app, and we want to be able to integrate that in whatever website we want, which is the beauty of Django. But so we've got this app now, and if we go back to our Sublime text editor, you can see it's been generated. It's been put in there for us because we are actually looking at my site, and it's inside my site. Hopefully that makes sense. I hope you're using something like Sublime where you can see the whole project structure. That's kind of all you need. So yeah. Alternatively, it's no different than, you know, all we're actually doing is, let me get this over. Let's see. Let's go to home. I've got this folder A. So like, if I go back, I went into this folder A, and then we went into my site, and then you've got my site, and you've got polls. And you know, these are all generated for us by Django, so you don't need to worry about that. Because remember, Django is a web framework and it's trying to make it easy for us, which it does. So, what would we do now? Well, the first thing you probably want to do is say, well, actually, I want to display something that isn't this. I want to display my own content, of course. So, how do we do that? Well, we're going to go to our views. And something Django doesn't do for us, it doesn't create this file called URLs. So we're going to go ahead and create another file, and we're going to call it urls.py. Now, we're storing this here inside the polls app. So whatever our app is, that's where we're storing it, and we're just calling it urls.py. And we want to import from Django.urls, I think. We want to import something called path. And we're going to do that in just a moment. I'm not going to define that yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our views.py, and we're going to say from Django.http import HTTP response. Now, if you're new to web dev, a HTTP response, you know, when you go to a website, you're essentially making a HTTP request, and you want the server to respond to you. So when you go on Google, you make a request to see something, and then it responds to you. So we're just going to do a super simple response. But yeah, so we're going to define a index view, which is kind of the done thing in the tutorial. And inside here, we need to have a request, right? I've said that before. So request, you know, might be like a post request or get request. You can kind of ignore that for now. You learn more about that later. And we also need to return, because they're functions, and then we're going to return the HTTP response, and inside here we can literally put some text. So we can put some hello world. Now, this isn't where you would render your HTML and stuff like that, but that doesn't matter. So what we've done, we've created a view now, which we haven't told Django how to access that, so we need to do that. So what we're going to first do, because I think this is a better order, is we're going to go to my site and we're going to open its URL path, and we're going to do include. We're going to import include from Django.urls. And our URL patterns is just a list, and it's basically a list of all the places we can go in our website. So we're going to do path, and then we're going to say polls, because it's a polls app. Now you can call this whatever you want, and I'll show you what that means. And we're not going to have anything there yet. And then we want to do include, and we're going to say polls.urls. Now what's polls.urls? This is the URLs file we just created inside polls. So we're including that. So we're saying actually, when we go to our browser and we go to polls, which we haven't done anything with yet, and our server's not running either, then we want to access everything to do with our polls app, right? So then we can say we're actually done with this, and now we just want to work with our polls app. And we're going to create URL patterns again in the same way as before, but we're going to create this path, and we're going to say by default, so when we're just in polls like this, then the default thing we wanted to see is views.index. Now views.index, I'll show you, we need to import. So from this directory, we're going to import views. Now views is just this, and this is index. So we're saying views.index is going to be the view we show when we go to polls. Alternatively, I'll show that in just a moment. And what we're going to do as well is we're going to give this a name, and we're going to call this index2. And you always want to have a comma at the end, because you're always going to be, it's a list, you always want to be adding another element to a list, possibly. So we can actually run the server now, and what we should get is a response. So if we python manage.py run server, we're going to, and we've got no mistakes, then what's going to be really cool is when we go here, we're going to have hello world, which is exactly what we typed. So what's happened? So we had our server set up, then we created an app called polls, and then we've gone to its root. So what would happen now, do you think, if in here we change this to ABC, and we always want to have a leading, trailing /? What would happen now? Well, this is no longer there, but it's saying, look, there is a match at ABC, and for a name equals for our view that's called index. So let's do ABC. And boom, we get it, and you can just keep going. So this can be, this can be whatever you want it to be, and you can have as many thingies as you want. So if we now copy that and we save it and we pop that in here, then we still get our hello world, right? So hopefully you understand exactly what's gone on there, but actually we just want it to be blank because that's much nicer. And we've got a hello world. Now, here I have to think, what do I want to show you? I think we could continue, because you don't yet know how to like render some HTML. So I think I'm going to continue. So what can we do next? Well, what we usually do is, well, we don't want to actually just be in our views.py, we don't just want to be displaying hello world. Hang on, I've got a coffee here. We don't just want to be displaying hello world, we want to be displaying HTML, which you may have done before. So the way we do that is with render, which was in here by default, if you remember. So Django's like, well, this is probably what you want to do. But what we want to do now is we want to go inside our polls app, and we want to create a directory called templates. And then we want to go inside templates, and bear with me, this is called namespacing. You want to create another directory called polls, just because that's what we've called it. And I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I will show you how to render a template, and then I think we'll be finished. And inside here now, we want to go into polls. And the reason we do this is because, so hang on, let's touch. So let's make an index.html. So this is where we're going to have our HTML code. And let's go back now. I don't know if I've gone back too far. No, this is okay, because this is where we're running our server and stuff. But all we've done now is we've gone into our polls app, we've created an app, a directory called templates, and inside there we've got something called polls, and then we've got index. Why do we do this? Well, imagine you have a bunch of apps, and they've all got a template, which is what we call this, a file called index.html. Then you run into issues. So what we do is, what Django have done is they've introduced namespacing to make it more manageable. So it will automatically look inside your app for templates, then the app name, and then it will look for the files there, which makes it nice and self-contained and easy to use. So all you have to know is that it will work. We do though need to go into our URLs, and here we need to tell it that our app name is in fact polls. So that's important. So make sure you've done that. And again, that's not the initial URLs. That's not the site URL file. This is the app URL file. So we're pretty much done with this because we're just going to do the one view today. And inside here, you might want some HTML code and say hello. That's going to be the title, so that's title. And then here you might want a body. Whoops, that is the body. Here you might want some p tags and just say hello world, which is what you're maybe more used to. So if we go back to our views now, we're going to change all of this. Remember, we always want to be returning. So this time though, we're going to return a render, and we want to return a request. And what we also want is our directory. So what we can actually do is we can just do polls index.html, and this is what I was trying to say. So what it's doing there is it knows to look in templates. You just have to take that for granted. This render knows that you're looking in templates, and then it's going to look for polls index. And here's where we usually pass a context, and the context is usually data from like a database. For us, this is just going to be empty for now. I feel like I'm just going to start developing more and more as we go on. So let's see what happens. Let's see where we go with this. So if that's clear, so now literally we're passing nothing to this index HTML, but we're saying that when we go to this view that we defined before, polls, when we go to here, this path, then we want this view to be loaded called index, and this is going to render that request, and it's going to return this polls.index, which we've put in templates, which is where it needs to be. So make sure it's actually in a folder called templates. Now this should work, and we've got no errors with our server. So if we load now, I mean nothing's going to change really. So actually it's come up with a message that template does not exist at polls, and the reason this has happened is because, remember I said about the settings earlier, go into the settings file, and for that app to actually exist it needs to be in our installed apps. And the reason that is because our templates, I think, is somewhere. The fact that we can find it in templates is defined somewhere in here, I believe. But we don't need to look for that. All we need to do is go into our installed apps, and what we're going to say is our app name. So it's polls, and then it's apps, and I'll show you why. And then it's polls config. And the reason that is because if we go into our polls app, there's this thing called our apps, and it's called polls config, and that's the name, it's polls. So that's what we've done, that's the logic. So settings, it's polls polls.apps.pollsconfig, which is this class here. Okay, so now everything should work. And whenever you make an app, you need to include it in here. So like Facebook.messenger, You know, if you were building Facebook, obviously, or whatever, it would go there if that was an app. So we should be able to reload now, and there you go, we get hello world. And what that's done is it's rendered our HTML. So inside here you can do anything you want, like you can in normal HTML, or you can add JavaScript as well and Bootstrap and all that stuff. Now, whilst we're here, I almost feel like, you know, you can click away if you want, but we should probably go ahead and build a model. Why not? I have nothing better to do. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go into this new file now called models.py, and when we say model, what we mean is our database. So if you've ever worked with SQL, well, MySQL or PostgreSQL, you know, usually you have to like or if you come from like a PHP background, you usually interface with SQL as well, and you kind of do insert X into table Y, you know, something like that. What we do in Django instead is we create a class, and that's going to represent the table. Now when we're in our admin area, this is going to be pluralized, so it's questions. So if you called this questions, it will be called questions. So I leave it a singular, or you can customize the admin later. So then what we do is we pass models.model, and this is just something you have to do. Best of reading the docs when you understand it more. So that's this. And again, this is kind of all based on the tutorial of my memory. But what we can do is we can have a question, and what we might have is question text, and the question text is going to use models, and then you're going to have a model field, a char field. Now I think the default thing we need to use is max length. So when we're working with text or char field, we have to give it a max length. And something else we want is we want like a pub date, I think it uses. I wasn't going to do this, by the way, but I'm just ending up doing it. Integer field. No, we don't want it to be an integer field, we want it to be a date time field. And this is simply, and what we're going to do is, we don't really need to do anything here. You don't have to specify anything. If you put like a publication date, this is what the table column will be called in the database, and you can do that with anything. So we could say, you know, question text. So this is just when you view it. So like when you view the table in your admin area, which we're going to look at as well, I suppose, then we can look at, it will look like this. But we don't need that. I will leave it there though, just to let you know you can do that. Now, something we do need to do, and you just need to take my word for it, is we need to add this define string variable, and we're going to have self, and we're going to return our question, our self dot question text. And what this is going to do is when we're in the shell and we're interacting with our model or a table, it's going to make sure that we see the actual text and not like the object. So, you know, if you made a question like what's your favorite color and you had the answer blue, we want it to see what's your favorite color. We don't want it to say question object 1, for example. So we're also going to create the second class now. Well, again, this video really wasn't about doing the example, so I'm not going to do any choices. It's super simple to do. Yeah, it's going to be a separate video. It's going to be a separate video. I could do it, but I don't want to make it too long. So that's it. We've got a question model now, and what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to go back over here, and we're going to say Python manage.py make migrations, and then we want to say the polls app. So if we haven't got any mistakes, then it's created the model question, and we can do Python manage.py shell. Oh, hang on, we need to exit this. I didn't actually do the migration. So Python manage.py migrate. This is how you always need to finish. Then we want to go into the shell. Now the shell lets us interact directly with our models. So this is great, but we have to import it. So we're going to say from polls dot models, we're going to import question. And if we've spelled everything correctly, we won't get any problems. And we also want to import from Django.utils, we want to import datetime. time zone, sorry, tired. So that's great. So we can now say, so we are literally interfacing with our table now. I'm just thinking about what else I'm going to do. Okay, so we're going to now define this variable called Q, and this is how we interact. So question is our table, remember, and then we have this field, which is question text. Now, if you remember, that's this, and this is just this. Super simple. And then we're going to say this is equal to what's your favorite color? I'll do it the English way since I'm English. And then we're going to say pub date equals time zone dot now, which is a function, and that's worked. And we can now just call save. So Django so simple, literally say, okay, here's the entry, and then we're just going to save it. And that's it, it's done now. So we can check the ID, it exists. We can do q dot question text. And it says, what's your favorite color? Now, if we'd done this and we hadn't specified this, then it would have just given us the object. So you can play around with that. And last but not least, we can say q dot pub date. And it's giving us this. It's a weird format, but we can see what's going on there. It's the 12th month, 15th day, it's 2020, and it's 1735. So that's it. We're just going to do the one, and we're going to exit. And the reason I'm doing that is just so I can show you something. And if we go back to our view now, remember our view is where we display everything, and we want to display that model data, that question. We want to display it in our browser. So what we're going to say now is we're going to import models. So we're going to go from .models, we want to import question. And the reason we have to do it like this is because it's a class. When we're importing views, it's a bit when we're importing functions, it's a bit different, but that doesn't matter. So we've imported question, and what we want to do now is, shall I say that? Yeah, we're just going to do it the basic way. We can do it two ways. I'll show you both ways. And we're going to say our question, because we've just got the one question. Well, let's say questions, because it's going to be all. It's going to be questions, no, question, which is our model. Remember, it's this, dot objects, dot all. And that's all we need to do. Now, this is fine. That's how we would do that. And then we want to pass that through. So we're going to say questions, and then we use colon, and then we're going to say questions. So this is what we're passing through, and this is what is going to be called on the other side. And remember, context is being passed through down here. So what we're saying is we're loading context, we're loading this data into here, and this data contains all of the objects from our database, which is just the one question that we've created. So hopefully you get that. So let's go to our index, and we do need to do something. So what we're going to do now is, and we don't have to do this, but I'm going to say if questions. So this questions now, maybe I should change it to make it a bit better. So yeah, let's do that. Let's go back to our views, just so you're clear. Let's call this question objects, and question objects has questions. So if we go back to our index, this is going to be called question object, just so you know which one it is. Then we want to load all of this, and we always need to close this if tag. So we're going to say end if, otherwise Django is going to complain at us. And we might have hello world here, and then we want to do a new line if you know some HTML, and then we want to do a for loop. And Django allows us to do that with its template language, and we're going to say for question. Again, I don't want to confuse you. This is just a for loop now if you've done Python. So for Q in question objects, so for every object that is in our objects, again we have to end for. We just want to display that as a list. So yeah, let's do that. And we're not going to have any styling, so it's going to look a bit horrible, but you need to use these now. So notice these don't have the % signs or modular signs, whatever you want to call them, and it's going to be q.question text. Now what's this question text? This question text is the same question text as this. We could also do pub date if we wanted to. So in fact, let's do that. Let's do colon, and we could say, no, that's fine. Let's do q.pubdate. So this is great, and this should be it. Just trying to think why it wouldn't work. Let's see what our server's saying. And the good thing about Django is it will tell you as well when, you know, something's up. And there's nothing wrong with our server from what it can identify, like, immediately. So, whoops, I'm not using that, I'm using Chrome. So what we might want to do is just reload this. And there you go, we did keep hello world in there. And we've managed to actually pass our question through. What's your favorite color? Which doesn't really make sense, but that was a question, of course. So we might want to do question mark here. There you go, we got our question mark, and then, you know, we might just want to say date published. I mean, this is really silly. You wouldn't display this information together like this, but I just wanted to show you. That this works. So then you've got date published equals December 15, 2020, which is today. Now we're almost done, but since we've got this far, this is just a simple way of displaying your models. And remember, you can do that in, I want to show you a different way if you prefer the graphical user interface. Now, this is getting more involved than I thought. So we're going to do python manage.py, and we're going to create a super user. So this is going to be you, and I'm just going to use monkhouse and email address, and I'm going to go to my password manager. That somehow worked. Got my Django. So you just put in whatever password you want. I think Django will complain if it's too simple, so use something that's got like some letters and symbols and numbers. And if you remember, in our URLs, but not this one, our apps one, there was a link called admin, right? In the same way we access polls, we can go to admin. So let's do that. And our server's down, so because we didn't reactivate it. Whoa, what's happened? Python manage.py run server. So that's now running. If we go here, we're going to have monkhouse, if I could spell, and I'm going to have this password, which is a really long password, and we can save that. I don't really care. And notice we've got our groups and users, which we didn't create, but we don't have the table we made, and the reason for that is because we need to go into a place called admin, and inside here we need to do the same. We need to do form.models import question, which is our model that we created, and then what we can do is we can do what is it, site.register, but it's not, it's admin.site.register question. And when we do that, the table is going to appear here, and we've got questions. So this is what I was saying. We had a question table, but it's actually displayed as questions. If we go inside here, we can see our questions, and we can add a question, right? So we can say, what's your favorite film? And we need to specify a date and time, because we didn't say that we would allow. Did I choose now? Yeah. So let's go ahead and save this. So we've got two questions now. And if we go back to our polls, now, then we're going to have two questions rendered, you know, and they've got their own field. So what's your favorite color? What's your favorite question? And why did that work? Because when we did our view, we said we want all of the questions in that table. And then when we did our index.html, we said for every single question in that table, I want you to print the question text and the date. Now, I don't know what else we could do. I guess I could do relationships. But at that, I'm just getting to a point now where I'm basically building the polls app, which wasn't my intention at all. But yeah, that's it, I think. So hopefully you enjoyed that video, and I think this is great because Django's so quick. Like, you can literally just from nothing, you can go from like 0 to hero. Like, you can, you know, what have we just done? We've basically set up a simple web server. Yeah, we haven't got any styling or HTML, but we've got some links and stuff like that. It's great. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and it will all be on Ubuntu. It will all be on Linux, and I'll make sure to use like requirement files so you can see exactly what I'm using whenever I'm using it. So yeah, leave a like, subscribe if you want to build something, and thank you for watching.